Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tim. G'day, how are you?
Doing pretty well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Well, as we know, 30 June is fast approaching, and this year we, of course, have the government's previous temporary minimum pensions having stopped from 1 July 2023, meaning that we have clients that have to take minimums that we might say are the ordinary minimums, but in the eyes of many is much larger than they've had to take for some period of time. So, Tim, I guess the context of today's discussion is just things that people need to be aware of in the construct of meeting that minimum and where they take payments above the minimum in this particular income year.
Yeah, and look, and I guess, one of your points early in the intro there, Aaron, of course, that a lot of people would have started pensions since the 1920 year, and so they were only sort of ever come across the discount rate rather than the original rate. So whilst it's a timely reminder for all those that had pre-existing pensions, it's also something for those that haven't been in that environment before to make sure that they understand the increase, particularly for those that potentially pay their pensions annually and only start to give thought to it now versus those who maybe pay monthly and that have already made adjustments. It's for those more ad hoc pensioners to ensure that they're doing things right.
Yeah, and it is very clear, obviously, within our tax ruling 2013-5 around when a pension commences and ceases, that we have to adhere to the terms of the pension. So here, we need to not only understand what the factors are telling us, so those percentages based upon the age of the individual, but what is in essence been agreed to between the member and the trustee. And that goes to your point about, well, is it being paid annually or is it a monthly fee? And that monthly fee might be $5,000 a month, but it's more than what the minimum is. And those sort of things you can get caught up in, especially where you get to the end of the year and there might have been a shortfall in respect to one or more of those pensions.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so I think it's pretty critical that people get used to identifying payments, particularly on a pension by pension basis, but also having rules in place so that if they do have say multiple pensions that they can distinguish with if they're paying more than the minimum required, where firstly where they want any excess to come from, which interest, whether it be a pension interest or an accumulation interest, and then whether they want that to be treated as a pension payment or a lump sum payment. And if it's to be treated as a lump sum payment, recognizing the obligations for transfer balance cap reporting. So if it's drawn down from a pension interest versus accumulation, that there might be ramifications for that.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point there because obviously we have had for some time since 2017 the ability to decide to take those above minimum pension amounts. So again, if people are looking strategically at where they might be taking that pension or that benefit from above and beyond the fact that it might come from an accumulation account, if we are seeing a commutation, you raised, of course, the point that we have a T-bar obligation and 28 days after the end of the quarter, regardless of the size of the fund.
Yep.
But there is some important documentation we need to have in place to demonstrate that that decision has been prospective for it to qualify as a commutation in the Commissioner's eyes.
Yeah, that's right, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the prospective comment, because a lot of the times when SMSF clients particularly sort of they almost look at their accounting from an end of year point of view, and it's really been over the last sort of, well, you can say since 2017, but it should have probably been before then anyhow, that people need to be far more proactive than reactive to how things are being included or excluded from certain events occurring, and so they really need to make sure that they address those issues as they're occurring, and have the necessary documentation in place.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, if we come up with the scenario whereby our clients clearly haven't drawn the minimum before the end of the year,
Yep.
then it can present some fairly important issues for that fund. Yes, we do have our 1/12 general powers of administration. The Commissioner, you can effectively self-assess that shortfalls if the pension didn't fail, but failure of a pension can come with some pretty serious ramifications.
Yeah, well, they can, and just before I sort of go through a couple of those ramifications, I think that goes back to that shortfall issue goes back to your documentation point as well, and without wanting to continually harp on it, but if you identify that you've got for one pension, say a $5,000 monthly pension payment, and that's well and above the minimum for that pension, but you don't address the income stream payments from the other pensions, then the more that you document that it's all coming from one and not the other, then you can't just say at the end of the year, well, that doesn't mean I don't have a shortfall because I'm going to transfer that money across. It's really about identifying that each pension will be paid their minimum, and then how you're going to treat with excess, how you're going to treat excess payments. And of course, what happens if you don't meet that requirement is that basically the fund is considered to have not been paying a pension for the entirety of the financial year, which means that anywhere there's two sort of real ramifications. One is that the fund loses an exempt current pension income deduction, and that could have ramifications if there's been significant potentially CGT events that have occurred through that year. But then the other thing is, with the pension ceasing back on the 1st of July, it may have undone all work that had been done previously strategically for the planning, from an estate planning point of view, around tax-free and taxable components within each separate pension interest. So, whilst from a transfer balance cap, it's not so dire because the pension ceases from a reporting point on the 30th of June, it's ECPI and interest allocation that is far more relevant.
Yeah, and to that extent, I guess the Commission has been very clear about the fact that the pension ceases for income tax purposes. There's always been this, well, how does what really applies in the context of CIS? But the reality here is that we have a cessation of a pension, and as you said, we have very clear instructions in respect to what happens from that tax perspective, what happens from a transfer balance account report. And even if we've got those clients that have pensions that go back maybe pre-January 2015, we can then throw into that pot potentially some of the grandfathering that existed around age pension or even Commonwealth Seniors Health Card.
Yeah, and it's an area that we don't spend a lot of time focusing on. I mean, you and I do touch on things, particularly the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, quite frequently, but it's not necessarily front of mind when you're contemplating fund administration, because it's more of a member outcome element. But if you get it wrong for the member, then there's ultimately no rectification with regards to things such as Centrelink. So you want to make sure that you're covering all bases. And getting it right, which is why this last quarter becomes pretty critical to ensure that you're meeting everything, and not only meeting everything, but if my calculations are correct, the 30th of June is a Sunday this year, so it's ensuring that all your pension payments are out of the fund and treated as being out of the fund before effectively the 28th of June.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this takes us on, Tim, to our topic of SMSF tax planning, which obviously we're going to be spending a lot of time about in May, and covering contributions and pensions, as the topic suggests today, a whole range of other things. So this is our tax planning checklist from last year, which I know you're sort of already feverishly working on. And so if you are looking to attend, our members obviously is included as part of your CPD membership, but our tax planning session not only includes a 1.5 hour CPD event, but comes with a very comprehensive tax planning checklist and user reference guide. So Tim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else about that. 39 or 40 odd pages. Yeah,
the only thing is that it gives me nightmares in preparation, making sure I've got all those links correct there, Aaron. So the nightmare begins for me right now, just getting the preparation done. But I'm looking forward to releasing the end product on the day of the webinar.
Yeah, well, if you want to find out more about our upcoming SMSF tax planning event, you can go to smartersmsf.com/events. You'll find the event there. As members, you will receive your registration automatically. For those of you that wish to purchase it, that is now available on the Smarter SMSF website. As always, Tim, great to catch up.
Yep, always a pleasure.
Speak to you next week. Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye-bye.